With the newest release of Season 5 of My Hero Academia, we are now past the first filler episode, and we're now on to the deep and intricate story that will be Season 5. The episode we're covering today, episode 90, is called Vestiges, and it's honestly an amazing episode. If y'all don't know, my very first video I ever made was about Hawks, and Hawks is one of the very central figures within this episode, so I'm absolutely stoked to cover it. So, starting off, we see Endeavor in a hospital bed, reflecting on his fight, and there's a flashback to the aftermath of Endeavor and Hawks' fight with the Nomu, and we see both of them in terrible shape. Out of the shadows appears Dabi of the League of Villains, who's here to retrieve the Nomu and simultaneously ready to fight and kill both Hawks and Endeavor. Thankfully, Mirko shows up and stops Dabi and offers her number 1 and number 2 heroes her support before Dabi escapes. However, before Dabi escapes, it's important to note that Dabi mentions to Endeavor not to die and that he'll see him again soon. Next, we see Hawks and Dabi meet up in a warehouse and discuss the lack of unison in their agreement, with Hawks under the impression that the Nomu would attack in an isolated location where no civilians would be hurt, and Dabi under the impression Hawks would merely bring just a strong hero, not the number 1. Hawks is obviously trying to speak with the leader of the League of Villains within Tomura Shigaraki, but Dabi has obvious skepticism of Hawks. His skepticism stems from the fact that no one died that day, and that if Hawks was truly committed to the cause of the League of Villains, why would Hawks save anybody? However, Hawks mentions that he needs to keep his reputation as the number 2 hero and to keep his faith within the people in order to bring the end result that the League of Villains want. Suddenly, there's a flashback, and we see Hawks being told to infiltrate the League of Villains from the inside and gain their trust so they won't be blindsided by villain moves such as the time at Camino Ward. As we know, when All Might fought All for One at Camino Ward, it was kind of a blindsided thing. No one knew that All for One was fixing to show up and absolutely decimate the city. So the Commission now believes they need a hero to infiltrate the League of Villains so they can be prepared for things such as Camino Ward. And Hawks, being unable to refuse, says he'll do his best, and we see in a monologue to himself saying, "I am Hawks, a hero too fast. I want a world where heroes have too much time on their hands, and I will get that." This exemplifies the characteristics of Hawks, in which he wants a world where everyone can relax. He isn't all about the hero's showmanship, which is why he was in fact picked. They told Hawks he was picked not only for his immense skills, but because he doesn't care for the fame of heroism. As Hawks and Endeavor walk together throughout the streets, Endeavor, being the intelligent man he is, begins to question the coincidence of the event and tells Hawks to be careful, and that he should not be hesitant to get help to deal with something like that in the future, implying he knows Hawks is doing something undercover. But Hawks just smiles and doesn't admit to Engie any of it. We are then taken to a brief flashback of Hawks as a kid, where he's absolutely adorable, first of all, saving lots of people, and the agency tells each other that they should recruit him and make him a hero, and that he has immense natural talent. In this scene, which is super important, we can see Hawks with an Endeavor toy, showing us that not only is he Endeavor's ally, but he's looked up to him since childhood. I think it's all very clear that Hawks has obviously not mentioned this to Endeavor, given their very interesting relationship where it seems kind of like a love-hate thing. Clearly, Hawks looks up to Endeavor more than anybody, and I think it's due to the fact that Hawks looks up to Endeavor particularly because Endeavor gets the job done at the end of the day. He isn't doing it for the showmanship. We all know All Might, and he's the greatest hero that's ever lived, right? But the dilemma with All Might is he is a man of showmanship, he is a man of fame, and that's very anti what Hawks is about, and so I can see why Hawks looked up to Endeavor particularly. This also kind of goes back to the scene where Hawks tells Endeavor that he can't do this alone, that the weight of the hero world, Hawks can't burden that himself. He can't carry that himself, and he needs Endeavor to push forward as the number 1 hero. This just shows the admiration that Hawks has for Endeavor, and I really love this scene, although it is brief. In the following part of the episode, we see Engie enter his family's house, and we see Natsu, Fuyumi, and Shoto, and immediately upon walking into the dining room, there's obvious tension, with Shoto first mentioning Endeavor's scar, and Natsu telling Endeavor that he won't forgive him for what he did, that despite becoming the number 1 hero, it doesn't erase all the torment he caused their family, and even mentions that he hardly knows Shoto due to Endeavor keeping Shoto from his siblings, and Natsu then walks out. We see on the television the public reception of Endeavor is now immensely changed. We see people now saying Endeavor is their favorite hero and mentioning the public rise of Endeavor's fame overall, which is very ironic given that the scene is showing that his family doesn't even fully respect him, and especially Natsu doesn't believe that his father is even redeemable. We see Shota then tell his father that Endeavor is an amazing hero, but he agrees with Natsu that Engie is not a great father, but he's willing to see where things go because he believes people can change, which is really heartwarming because all Engie wants to do is atone for his past, right? And we see that Natsu clearly doesn't care for it, but Shoto, his son that he's done everything for, he sacrificed everything for, regardless of whether it was good or bad, his son believes that he is redeemable. Endeavor tells Fuyumi sorry for what he said and everything he's ever done, and he eventually walks out and recalls his conversation with All Might, discussing what it means to be the number 1 and what it means to be strong, and he remembers that it's to secure their future, the youth, the citizens, the weak. He wants to protect them and allow them to live a good life. He says he won't ask for forgiveness for his past, but instead he'll atone, which is admirable. And Devereaux doesn't want to take any shortcuts on his path to become a better man. In fact, he feels he's already somewhat taken a shortcut to become number one. It wasn't getting number one in the way he wanted. Instead, it was due to All Might's forced retirement. That already bothers him as it is, and the last thing he's going to do is take a shortcut to become a better father. In the final minutes of the episode, we see Deku exhausted going to bed, and upon sleeping, he's met with the vestiges of One for All, being able to see 6 of them, with the other 2 being blurred out. Within this dream, Deku can't move, but he can see everything, and we are taken through moments of the life of the first user, who is the younger brother of All for One. We see All for One have a god complex and believes he can quote-unquote save people by stripping away their impurities or granting them power. The first user, as mentioned by All for One, is weak and frail and quirkless, and All for One seems to have sympathy towards his brother, but in a demeaning way. We see All for One say that he feels like he's in the comic books they read together as kids, because everything he desires and every dream he's ever wanted is granted to him by his cult-like followers. However, the first user quickly states that he only read the first 3 chapters, and if he finished the story, he knew good would always prevail. While the first user is locked away in a room, we see All for One come in and grant him a quirk that even his frail body could use, despite the first user not wanting it. And that quirk he was granted is One for All, and thus we see the genesis of the ability of our protagonist that is passed down from all these generations. Within this dream of these vestiges, we see Deku cognizant that he is the 9th user. The first user then talks to Deku and tells him that he isn't alone, and he mentions that the singularity is awakening all before Deku wakes up. The singularity is the manifestation of all the former users' quirks within Deku, and we'll be seeing that as the story goes on. And when Deku wakes up, his room has taken immense damage clearly. The window's broken, things are flung around the room, and we see Deku staring at his hand shaking with power, and the episode ends here. This episode has some great setup here. Firstly, within this episode, we see Hawks' plan laid straight on the table to infiltrate the League of Villains and to get more information and to get in contact with Tomura Shigaraki. At the same time, we see Endeavor trying to redeem for his actions of being a terrible father at times, which is something that we'll continually see throughout the season and throughout the show, is this Endeavor redemption. Whether you believe he's redeemable or not, that's up to you, but I think taking steps towards actively atoning for his past to become a better man is absolutely something great. Then we see more of the backstory of this amazing quirk of One for All, and we see Deku make contact with the first user and being able to see all of them. Although Deku can't speak with any of them now as his mouth is covered by this mist, we still see that Deku is able to understand more about this quirk, and something is awakening within him, which is going to be amazing to see progress over time within this show. So guys, this is my first time doing a My Hero Academia episode breakdown. Usually I just do the manga, but I want to start covering the episodes as well, as this season is going to be absolutely freaking crazy. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, I know it's not my normal type given that it's covering the anime, but of course I love the anime. That's where I initially started on My Hero. So please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and leave me any feedback as you want. And if you haven't seen the Hawks video that I made, my very first video, it's honestly, compared to the videos now, the quality is not nearly as good, but it is my first video ever. So if you want to go show that love, I'll leave the link in that in the description.